It started like any other Thursday night. Me, exhausted, trudging into our house well past 9 p.m. I dropped my laptop bag by the door and loosened my tie with a sigh that probably came from somewhere deeper than just work stress. The living room lights were dimmed, and the only sound was the low hum of the fridge down the hall. I figured Hannah had gone to bed already, and honestly, I didn't blame her. She'd mentioned something about a late client dinner, and I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I should have. I collapsed on the couch without turning on the TV, scrolling mindlessly through my phone like I always did to wind down. Instagram, emails, news, I was halfway between numb and disconnected. But then something caught my eye. A notification. Hannah posted a story. That in itself wasn't odd. Hannah worked in PR, so social media was practically part of her bloodstream. But for some reason, I hesitated before tapping it open. There was this strange weight in my chest, like my instincts had already seen something my eyes hadn't. And there it was. The photo wasn't even particularly scandalous if you looked at it through a stranger's lens. She was sitting at a restaurant table, one of those high-end places with spotless tablecloths and ambient lighting. A couple of wine glasses, a half-eaten appetizer, silverware arranged like art. But the part that hit me like S***ker punch was the man sitting next to her, right next to her. Not across, not part of a group, just her and him, her boss. His name was Anthony Delgado, and I'd heard that name in passing more times than I could count over the past year. Always with praise. Anthony has a brilliant eye for messaging. Anthony knows exactly what the client wants. Anthony's been mentoring me on the big accounts. I never thought anything of it until that night. He was leaning in toward her, laughing. The kind of laugh where his eyes crinkled. The kind that didn't come out at formal work events. Hannah had this relaxed expression on her face. She wasn't trying to hide anything. If anything, she looked comfortable. Effortlessly at ease beside him in a way that stung to watch. Her hand was resting on the table close, too close to his plate. The positioning of her body, the tone of the lighting, the unspoken message behind it all, felt wrong. But it was the caption that did me in. Sometimes dinner with the right person matters more than all the deals. I read it 3 times, then a 4th, hoping I had misunderstood something. I hadn't. Dinner with the right person. Not the team. Not great night with the office. Not closing out a big pitch. Just the right person. One person. Him. I sat there, frozen on the couch, the glow of my phone burning into my retinas. My mouth had gone dry. My first thought wasn't even anger, it was confusion. I didn't know how to interpret what I was seeing. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I mean, we all know how social media can spin moments out of context. But deep down, I wasn't confused. I was rattled. Because I knew Hannah. I knew how she curated things, how she chose words carefully. Not just in her job, but in life. That caption wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was intentional. And she had posted it knowing full well that I would see it. That thought alone hit me harder than I expected. Why would she post that? Why would she want me to see it? Before I could spiral further, I tapped her profile again. The story was still there, for now. But right as I clicked back to rewatch it, it vanished. Deleted. No explanation. No message. Just gone. Like it never existed. My stomach turned. I felt my chest tighten. If I had looked at it even 5 minutes later, I might have missed it altogether. I opened our text thread and hovered over the keyboard. I almost typed, "Who was that dinner with?" Or "That caption was weird." But I didn't send anything. I just stared at the blinking cursor while my pulse thudded in my ears. A few minutes later, another notification popped up. New story from Hannah. This one was completely different. It was a group photo, her full team, lined up around a long table. Probably 20 people, everyone smiling, holding drinks, a few doing that overly excited pose that corporate people use to fake team spirit. And there was Anthony again, but this time a few seats down, half-cropped, indistinct. The caption now read, "Another great night with the best team in the biz. Hashtag grind mode, hashtag client life." It was so polished, so generic, it almost made me laugh. Almost. That's when it hit me. She had curated the correction. She saw the first post had said too much, or looked too int asterisk mate, or implied too clearly something she didn't want out in the open. She deleted it and replaced it with something safer. Something group-oriented. Something that looked like work. But I'd already seen the first one. She didn't know I had. And suddenly, that became everything. I stayed on the couch for over an hour, not even sure what I was waiting for. Maybe a message from her, or maybe for her to walk through the door and offer an explanation that would make sense. But nothing came. Just the silence of the house and the buzzing in my head. Eventually, I pulled myself up and got ready for bed. When Hannah came home, it was after midnight. I heard the door click quietly, the careful sound of someone trying not to wake their spouse. I didn't say anything. I pretended to be asleep, and she didn't check. In the dark, I listened to the quiet sounds of her moving through the room. The rustle of fabric, the soft thud of heels on the closet floor, the zipper of her bag being opened and closed. She slipped under the sheets beside me and let out a soft sigh. Peaceful, content sigh. And in that moment, I felt more alone than I had in years. Maybe I told myself it really was a work dinner. Maybe I was overthinking things, reading too much into a caption, letting a shadow grow into a monster. But the unease didn't go away. It had sunk into my bones, cold and low and steady. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of her breath as she drifted off beside me. The Hannah I loved was right there, inches away. But suddenly, I wasn't sure if I knew her at all. And even if I did, I wasn't sure she was still mine. The morning after that post, I woke up with a different kind of weight in my chest. Not just the usual grogginess that comes from a restless night, but a gnawing sense that something was already broken, and I had missed the sound of it snapping. Hannah was already up. I found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up and gave me a quick smile. Too quick. I watched her for a second. Her face was calm, untouched by guilt. If I hadn't seen that story, if I hadn't felt that shift in my gut, I probably wouldn't have thought twice about her behavior. She asked if I wanted eggs. I said no. She asked how I slept. I lied. For the rest of that day, I couldn't shake the image of her sitting beside her boss, laughing, hand nearly touching his plate like it belonged there. And that caption, dinner with the right person, I kept hearing it in her voice, even though I'd only read the words. That was the first crack, but once I saw it, everything else started to fall apart. It's strange how the mind works, how it suddenly starts connecting things you'd brushed off or ignored for months. Small things, forgettable moments, all coming back with sharp edges now. I remembered the first time she started staying late. It was early spring, maybe March. She told me her agency had landed a massive account, some national brand with 1 million moving parts. At the time, I was proud. I told her I admired her work ethic. She laughed and kissed me and said I was sweet. But a few late nights turned into her coming home at 10 p.m. more days than not. I used to ask questions. How was the meeting? What client were you working with tonight? Did you get dinner? She always had answers, but they were getting shorter. Vague. Words like, just wrapping up, and, you wouldn't know the brand anyway, became the norm. Then she stopped sharing anything at all. And I let her. Her phone was the next thing that changed. First, it was small. She started turning it face down during dinner. I asked her about it once and she laughed it off, said it helped her stay present during meals. I actually believed that for a while. But then she added a new lock screen code. That wasn't normal. We'd always had open access to each other's phones. Not because we checked them, but because we never needed to. I asked once lightly what the code was. She smiled. You don't need it, babe. Just like that. Another thing that came back to me, her outfits. I used to love the way she dressed for work. She always had a balance of professional and stylish. But lately, something had shifted. Tighter skirts, low-cut blouses, heels she hadn't worn in years. I remember thinking, maybe it's the new role, maybe she just wants to feel confident at the office. But then I noticed something else. She'd come home in different clothes than she left in. Not always, but enough times that it stood out. She'd wear flats in the morning, then come back in heels. Or a new top, Once she came home with her makeup completely redone, fresher than when she'd left the house at 7 a.m. I remember staring at her that night while she pulled off her earrings in front of the bathroom mirror. She caught my reflection and said, "What? Why are you looking at me like that?" I just shook my head. "You look nice." She smiled and walked past me like nothing was wrong. Then came the fragrance. I know this sounds ridiculous, but you learn someone's scent after you've been together long enough. Not just their perfume, but their shampoo, their skin, the laundry detergent on their clothes. It becomes second nature, familiar. But one night, I leaned in to kiss her cheek and caught a different scent altogether. Heavy, musky, something darker than her usual soft floral notes. It wasn't on her in the morning. It wasn't in our bedroom. It wasn't on her dresser. It wasn't hers. I asked about it. She blinked like I'd asked something absurd. "It's a sample someone gave me at work," she said. "I just sprayed it on to see if I liked it. But I never saw the bottle. And I never smelled it again, on her or in our home. I wish I could say I brought it up again. But I didn't." A few days later, I was cleaning up in the laundry room and found something that stopped me cold. Buried in the basket of delicates was lingerie, lace, sheer, deep berg *NDY. Something she had never worn with me, not once in all our years together. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The tags were gone, like it had been worn, but not washed. Then it disappeared. I never saw it in the laundry again. It felt like finding evidence of a life I wasn't invited to. That weekend, I checked our bank statements. Not because I expected to find anything, but because I was grasping for something, anything, that would explain the unease crawling under my skin. There were cash withdrawals from ATMs nowhere near her office. One in the Marina District, another on the south side near a hotel I'd never heard her mention. She never used cash. We were both digital all the way. Venmo, Apple Pay, credit cards. Always traceable. Always clean. Except this wasn't. And then there was the driver's seat. One morning, I moved her car so I could take the bins to the curb. As soon as I sat down, I knew something was off. The seat was pushed far back, way farther than Hannah ever needed. She's petite. I always had to pull the seat forward when I drove her car. But this time, it felt like it had been set for someone at least 6 feet tall. I stared at the mirror angles, the position of the steering wheel. It didn't match her. I wanted to believe she had taken it to the mechanic, that someone at the shop had moved the seat. I even asked casually if she'd had anything done to the car lately. She shook her head, sipping her coffee. "Nope. Why?" I told her it felt different when I sat in it. She laughed. "You're imagining things, babe." And maybe I was. But even that felt planted, like a phrase rehearsed just enough to sound spontaneous. The worst part wasn't any of these things by themselves. It was how they layered, one after another. A strange look here, a half-truth there. Patterns that formed when I stopped excusing everything as work stress or coincidence. I tried telling myself that I was being paranoid, that couples go through weird phases, that maybe I was overthinking everything. But after that dinner post, something shifted permanently. I started watching her differently, listening harder, noticing how often she looked at her phone, how her smile seemed a little more forced when she said she loved me, how she always seemed to disappear for a few minutes before getting into bed. Somewhere in all of this, I began to feel like a guest in my own marriage. And the thing that scared me most wasn't the idea that she might be cheating. It was the realization that, if she was getting good at it. It was a Sunday afternoon when the truth stopped being theoretical. I'd stopped looking for evidence, honestly. After weeks of unease, half-glimpses, subtle lies, and growing distance, I was tired of watching my own marriage rot from the inside. Part of me had started to gaslight myself. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe I was the one changing. Maybe this was just a rough patch, and rough patches didn't need to be dissected like crime scenes. Then I found the receipt. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning, really cleaning, the kind of deep clean that usually happens when your brain needs a distraction. Hannah was out running errands, or so she said. I'd stripped the couch cushions and was picking up loose coins and old gum wrappers when I spotted her purse slumped in the corner of the room. It had tipped over, half open, and a few things had spilled out. lip gloss, a travel-sized hairspray, sunglasses, and a folded receipt, half crumpled, tucked between the lining and the bottom flap. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe I was looking for proof. Maybe I just hated that I already expected to find it. The paper was soft from being handled, the ink slightly faded, but the words were still legible. The Whispering Pines Inn, Lake Tahoe. Saturday through Monday, 2-night stay, 1 luxury king suite, bottle of Pinot Noir, dinner for 2, seared duck, mushroom risotto, dessert pairing. I stared at it so long I stopped seeing the words. Just blocks of ink. Shapes. The date stamped at the top. The same weekend she told me she was at a strategic team retreat. She had packed a rolling suitcase, kissed me goodbye, said it would be non-stop presentations and panels, said she might not be reachable much because the schedule would be brutal, said all of that with a straight face. I even remember joking, enjoy the fluorescent lights and dry hotel bagels. She laughed. She laughed. And meanwhile, she was sipping wine by a fireplace with someone, eating duck, sleeping in a king-size suite with him. Whoever he was. I didn't know. I didn't need to. The receipt said enough. The inn wasn't even a business hotel. I Googled it out of morbid curiosity and stared at the results like they were written in another language. Pictures of snow-dusted balconies, crackling stone fireplaces, clawfoot tubs with candles arranged around the rim. The kind of place you go when you're escaping. They even offered couples wine-tasting experiences. There was nothing corporate about it. No conference rooms. No networking. Just romantic isolation. Curated for 2. My ears were ringing, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't just instinct. This was proof, unmistakable and deliberate. She had lied. She had crafted a whole itinerary of deception and delivered it to me with a casual kiss and a promise to take notes for Monday. I sat there with that receipt in my lap for nearly an hour. No rage, no tears, just a long, sharp silence. Something inside me had been waiting for this, waiting to stop defending her, waiting to stop giving her the benefit of the doubt. I didn't confront her when she got home. I didn't say a word. I watched her unpack the small suitcase, heard her mention that the retreat was draining. She looked me in the eye and said, "I missed you." I just nodded. That night, I lay in bed, awake, staring at the ceiling while she breathed softly beside me. Every inch of the space between us felt like a canyon. I wasn't hurt anymore, I was done. But I didn't act impulsively. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the receipt at her like some TV drama. I needed something more than confrontation. I needed clarity. So, the next morning I started putting pieces together. The hotel was nearly 4 hours away. There was no way she had gone there alone. I checked her texts while she was in the shower. Her phone was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode now. Months ago, she changed it from the birthday combo we always used. But one night she had entered it while I sat behind her in the car. 0609. I remembered. Her texts were mostly wiped, clean, curated. But she'd missed one. A single message from a name I didn't recognize. A.D. Hope you got home safe. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to do it again. No emojis. No sign-off. Just facts. I didn't need to guess who it was. Her boss, Anthony Delgado. The same man from the dinner story. The same man who had been slowly sliding into the empty spaces between us while I sat at home making dinner for one. I didn't respond. I didn't even take a *T. I just read it again and again until I could recite it with my eyes closed. That afternoon, I checked our shared credit card account again. Something I hadn't done since the last time I found her ATM withdrawals. And there it was. A charge from the Whispering Pines Inn, billed to her personal card. But 2 days before the trip, she had transferred $500 from our joint account into her own. Said she needed it for work meals. I scrolled further. A dinner in Sacramento 3 weeks earlier. Another in Santa Rosa. One more downtown. All within weeks. All small enough to hide. All paid in cash. I thought back to those nights. The makeup. The fresh perfume. The late meetings. The excuses. I didn't say anything that night either. I cooked dinner like I always did. Chicken and pasta. She was on her phone most of the time, tapping and smiling at something. Probably him. She complimented the seasoning. Told me I was getting better at garlic. I nodded and said thank you. After dinner, she showered. Came out wearing one of my t-shirts like she always used to in the early days. It used to feel romantic. Now it felt like camouflage. She kissed my cheek and curled up beside me on the couch. Like nothing had changed. Like there weren't lies layered between us like invisible bricks. And for a second, I wondered if I was going crazy. If maybe this was normal. If people just stopped loving each other slowly, and maybe this was just a natural end. But then I thought of the receipt again. The room, the wine, the other side of the bed. The skin she gave him that she never gave me anymore. I wasn't crazy. I was awake. I didn't explode. Not the way people expect you to when you find out. There was no yelling, no storming out, no late-night confrontation that ends with broken picture frames or suitcase wheels squeaking down the driveway. I didn't cry either. That part surprised me. It's not that I didn't want to. It's that the part of me that used to ache for her had gone numb. Instead, I decided to go quiet. It wasn't even something I planned. Not exactly. But when Hannah came home the next evening and greeted me with her usual, "Hey, babe?" I looked up from my laptop and gave her a small nod. No smile. No warmth. Just acknowledgement. I saw the flicker of confusion pass over her face, like she noticed something was different, but couldn't quite name it. She kissed my cheek. I didn't kiss back. She asked how my day was. I said, "Fine." That was it. If she was waiting for more, she didn't get it. That became the rhythm. I didn't lash out. I didn't accuse. I just stopped participating. I stopped asking how her day went. I stopped reaching for her hand under the dinner table. I stopped offering to rub her neck when she said she was tired. I stopped laughing at her little stories that used to make me smile, even if I'd already heard them 3 times before. And slowly, the distance between us, this chasm she'd carved with secrecy, became a canyon I let grow wider by the day. She didn't seem to know what to do with it. At first, she tried to normalize things, forcing conversation at breakfast or offering to make coffee for me when I usually made it for both of us. I accepted it without thanks. That part, the silence, began to chip at her. I could tell. She started lingering in doorways more often, pausing like she was about to say something important, then didn't. I could feel her watching me while I worked at my desk, like she was trying to read my face, looking for signs of suspicion. But I kept my expression neutral. Not angry, not bitter, just hollow. And that emptiness? It was a choice. It was preparation. Because I knew the minute I let her talk her way out of this, she would. She was good with words. Too good. A trained professional in PR who could spin a car crash into a sales pitch. If I confronted her before I was ready, she'd bury the truth beneath apologies and misdirection. So I chose silence as my strategy. I kept the receipt from the hotel. I folded it flat, slipped it into an envelope, and tucked it inside an old book on the shelf. One I knew she'd never read. I began collecting pieces, little things. I ****ed the text from A.D. before she could delete it. I printed a copy of our joint account transfers and circled the one marked for meals. I even took photos of her travel bag, half-packed with silky tops I'd never seen her wear for anything work-related. All of it locked away in a folder labeled insurance. But I never touched it when she was around. I played it cool, mechanical. We still ate dinner at the same table. We still slept in the same bed. But I had vanished emotionally, and she was starting to feel it. One night, she sat beside me on the couch, her legs tucked under her, and asked, "Is everything okay with us?" I looked up from my phone, pretending to think about it. "Sure," I said flatly. "Why wouldn't it be?" She paused. "I don't know. You've just been quiet lately." I shrugged. "Just tired." A lie. But it worked. That night, she curled up next to me in bed like always, but I could feel her hesitating. Her arm wrapped around my chest, but there was no ease in her posture. It felt like a test, like she was waiting for me to reject her physically the way I already had emotionally. I didn't push her away. I didn't do anything. I just lay there like stone. And the next morning, she didn't try again. I started to notice the little shifts in her behavior. She used to be glued to her phone in the evenings, texting, scrolling, grinning quietly to herself at things she never shared. Now she kept it face down. Sometimes, she'd leave it in the other room entirely, like she wanted me to know she wasn't hiding anything. It was almost funny, the performance of transparency, only when she felt the ground slipping. She also started initiating conversations again, about dinner plans, weekend getaways, her sister's baby shower, things she hadn't brought up in months. I nodded through all of it. One night, she said, "I was thinking we could do a little trip soon, just the two of us. We haven't done that in a while." I looked up at her. "Yeah, we haven't." She smiled like she was relieved. "So maybe we could plan something? Like the coast or even Tahoe again." Tahoe. She said it like it was just another location, not the place where she'd shattered everything. I tilted my head slightly. "You really liked Tahoe, didn't you?" She blinked. There was a pause, half a second too long. "Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, for a retreat, it wasn't exactly relaxing, but, the view was nice." I stared at her, expression unreadable. Bet it was. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up to put her mug in the sink, like she needed to move. Her back was turned for longer than necessary. That was the first time I knew she was scared. Not guilty. Scared. She couldn't tell what I knew. Couldn't read me. That's when it clicked. I had taken the one thing she never thought I would. Control. I was always the predictable one. The safe bet. The steady partner who asked before he assumed. Forgave before he accused. But now, she was in the dark, and it was driving her insane. So I let her twist. I let her lie next to me at night, wondering if I'd seen the cracks. I let her pack her gym bag with the same energy she once used to hide secrets, knowing I'd stopped asking questions. I let her walk through this house like it was still hers to command, while I quietly removed every string she thought she held. My silence became her mirror. Every time she asked me a question, I gave her half an answer. Every time she offered affection, I received it with passive distance. She didn't know if I was distracted or disgusted, and that's exactly where I wanted her. There was no dramatic showdown, no screaming match, just a slow unraveling of the comfort she'd wrapped herself in. Because if I had learned anything from that receipt, that text, those lies, it was that betrayal doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it whispers. And now? So did I? Silence gave me space, not just to think, but to move. By the time I'd gathered the proof of Hannah's affair, the decision had already **N forming in the background. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to blow it all up for the sake of some dramatic finale that would leave us both scorched. What I wanted was freedom. Not just emotional, but logistical. Clean. Sharp. Unmistakable. So I got to work, quietly, deliberately, and with the kind of calm that only comes when you've accepted the truth. And maybe that's what made it all so strange. How calm I felt. I wasn't plotting. I was protecting. And the first thing I protected was myself. The first step was money. We had a shared account for bills, groceries, vacation savings, the usual. But almost everything went through there, and I knew she'd notice if I made any drastic changes. So instead, I started small. I opened a new personal checking account under a different bank. One she didn't use, one we'd never discussed. I routed a percentage of my paycheck into it. Not a huge amount, just enough to build quietly over time. She didn't notice. Then I got a new credit card in my name only. I kept the statements digital, set up paperless billing, made small charges here and there, gas, coffee, a few Amazon orders. Just enough to keep it active. She didn't ask about any of it. Next, I started shifting subscriptions and accounts. Spotify family plan? Cancelled. Our Netflix profile that we both shared? Downgraded. She thought it was a glitch, said something about calling customer support. I shrugged and said I'd look into it. I didn't. The grocery delivery service? I canceled that too. Our HelloFresh box stopped arriving on Thursdays, and when she asked, I told her they'd suspended our account. She believed me. It became a strange sort of game, how much I could remove from her world before she noticed. The answer? More than I expected. Every small disappearance felt like reclaiming a brick of the house I used to feel safe in. One brick at a time. I also started backing things up, my own things. I made copies of important documents. Birth certificate, passport, car title. I uploaded scans to cloud storage she didn't have access to and emailed a copy to myself at an old account she'd forgotten I still used. I removed my name from anything optional, recurring memberships we no longer needed, services that didn't serve me anymore. I started separating the threads of our lives, unraveling the knot that had tied us together for so long. And as I did, I watched her. She moved through the house like it was still hers. She wore my t-shirts, used my charger, left coffee mugs beside my books like we were still us. She kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. She told me, I love you on autopilot, like a habit she wasn't ready to break. But I didn't say it back. Not once. I didn't need to anymore. I also started testing boundaries, planting small obstacles in her day, just to watch her reaction. One morning, I moved the charger she always used to the opposite side of the bedroom. She stood in the doorway, confused for a second, then bent to grab mine instead. Didn't say a word. Another day, I parked behind her in the driveway when I got home first. She hated when I blocked her in. She walked into the kitchen, took a sip of water, and waited for me to move it. I didn't. 10 minutes passed before she asked. I looked up and said, "Oh, right, my bad." I made no effort to rush. Her tone was still polite, still sweet, but I could hear the effort in it. She was trying to keep things smooth, because deep down, she knew something had shifted, and she didn't know what I knew. That unknown? It was my wee *p***n. I started sleeping deeper. Not because I was at peace, but because I was drained. Keeping up the charade took energy. Pretending not to know. Pretending not to care. I woke up tired, but every morning I felt a little more insulated, less exposed. And then I started laying foundations. I contacted a lawyer. Not to file anything yet. Just an initial consultation. Her name was Tasha, recommended by a friend who'd gone through his own messy split a year earlier. I told her everything, carefully, factually, without dramatics. Just the truth. She listened patiently. She didn't act surprised. She had heard the story before, probably 100 times. When I finished, she said, "You've already done half the work most people skip. You've kept receipts, literally and figuratively. That's good. That gives us leverage." I nodded. I wasn't looking for leverage to win. I was looking for protection when I left. Tasha walked me through options, how to divide property, how to handle shared accounts, what to expect emotionally, financially, legally. She talked about the difference between fault and no fault, the timeline for mediation, and what judges looked for in contested splits. It was a lot, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. I left her office with a folder under my arm and a strange feeling in my chest. Not dread, but relief. For the first time in weeks, I had a roadmap, a way out. From there, I started creating a list. Just a simple Google Doc, titled Transition Notes. Contained everything I needed to remember when the moment came. Cancel shared insurance. Remove access to cloud storage. Transfer vehicle title. Notify landlord, if needed. Change emergency contact info. Prepare explanation for family. Remove sentimental items from shared spaces. Backup photos, my own. Close streaming accounts. New email/passwords. Disable location sharing. Pack go bag. It was methodical. Cold, maybe, but it helped me breathe. Hannah, meanwhile, had shifted into subtle overdrive. She started cooking more 3 nights in a row. Pasta, stir-fry, tacos. Always her go-to dishes. Comfort food. The kinds of meals she used to make when we were still new and trying to impress each other. She asked if I wanted to go for walks again like we used to. I said, "Not tonight." She asked if I wanted to watch our show. I said, "Go ahead without me." She asked if I was okay. I said, "Yeah." It was always the same answer. Just enough to keep her guessing. Just enough to keep her from reaching the truth I already held in my hands. I could feel her slipping, not from me, but from the version of herself she tried to sell. The one who'd balanced the lie so well for so long. She was starting to feel the distance. And I was almost ready. While on a work trip in Austin, I posted a photo at dinner, me smiling, a woman leaning in close. My caption, "Freedom feels better than anything." Hours later, Hannah blew up my phone. Calls, messages. Her tone had shifted, urgently sweet, suddenly invested. The silence I gave her was now hers to carry. For once, she was on the outside, wondering what I was hiding. Hannah started trying dinners, trips, soft touches, but I stayed cold, detached. The power had shifted. I watched her panic grow, her charm wear thin. Where I once begged for attention, she now begged for connection. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. For the first time in years, I held the ending in my hands.